set auto-destruct sequence.
It's the time allotted that concerns me.
Recognize Picard, Jean-Luc, Captain. Recognize Riker, William T., Commander.
Maximum warp!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Warp Core Podcast. It is I, UrzaMaster. Joining me as always, I've got Fert Derby from the Q Continuum and Lord Uther from the Windy Continuum, shall we say. The Bears. And we are exploring an episode of Mystery and Kidnapping. Oh yeah. And this is going to be an interesting one to talk about. If ever there is a more 80s-esque episode, I don't know what it would be. Maybe the one where they play the game. We'll find out. But definitely some interesting things going on here, some interesting commentary on real world, real life. But Fert Derby, I want to hear your take on When the Bough Breaks, directed by one of our favorites. Who was that again?
Oh, mind your manners, UrzaMaster and Lord Uther. We're talking episode 16, Warp Core fans. When the Bough Breaks. It was the day after Valentine's Day, February 15th, 1988. Our director was indeed Kim Manners, who got their first acting role at age 3 in a Chevy commercial. His father was William Bodine. William Bodine was the director of The Adventures of Rin Tin Tin, which was in the mid to late 50s, a heroic dog show in saving children and orphans and the world for 5 seasons. So he clearly had a leg up in Hollywood. We call them Nepo babies now, but back then they won the genetic lottery. And Kim, though, established himself as beyond just directing children and animals. He kind of got his ears wet with 12 episodes of 21 Jump Street, which, as you recall, was the launching pad for one Johnny Depp and one Richard Grieco. Depp, Grieco, Depp, Grieco. He also did 7 episodes of the criminally underrated Bruce Campbell Western for Fox, The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. It is a cult hit. I'm sure you can find it on streaming or DVD packages at your local Walmart. He made his biggest splash with Chris Carter's The X-Files. Kim Manners was the director of 52 episodes. Basically, an episode a week. He directed a year's worth of The X-Files over its 7-8 season run. And then he blessed the set of one of UrzaMaster's all-time favorite long-running science fiction, horror, fantasy, comedy, mystery, action shows, Supernatural. And 16 episodes, while not the 52 of The X-Files, is no small change, no small potatoes in the world of television. He actually joined The X-Files in the 2nd season of that show on advice from Rob Bowman, who at the time was working on Next Generation and The X-Files, and then James Wan and Glenn Morgan, who would go on to successful careers in other shows, both for Fox. They worked on Millennium and The X-Files, and they all got their start on 21 Jump Street. So our writer is Hannah Louise Shearer, and she will actually pen 5 episodes total of The Next Generation and 1 episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine for the Bermanverse. She left in between Season 1 and Season 2, even though some of her subsequent episodes will appear in Season 2. She did not get along with showrunner Maurice Hurley, which sadly seems to be a common theme for people who worked with Maurice Hurley in the late 80s. Don't forget, this is the man who came as a showrunner of Miami Vice on NBC and Michael Mann and MTV Cops, and then was asked to shepherd the Star Trek Resurrection franchise, science fiction, syndication, the whole works. And he clashed with several female behind the scenes and in front of the cameras. I don't know if Marina Sirtis and Gates McFadden, I'm not sure how they regard him now. They certainly had their run-ins there. And in fact, it caused Gates McFadden to make an unexpected detour, which we'll be discussing further on into our Warp Core podcasts. But anyways, Hannah did do 5 episodes of this show and another of DS9. We had an X-Files alum. We had Jerry Hardin. He was Deep Throat, if you will, in the early seasons of the Chris Carter show. He will also come back and play Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, in Time's Arrow. So looking forward to that. It was me moved deeper into the seasons. He also had a brief role in Big Trouble in Little China. He's in the wraparound story. He's the attorney trying to figure out what Jack Burton was up to in San Francisco's Chinatown. So again, much like Michael Pataki in Too Short a Season, he's a guy that you keep snapping your fingers at. I've seen him before. I just don't remember where. Genre guy, X-Files, Big Trouble in Little China, Star Trek. You got to love it. We also had Brenda Strong, and she will go on to have a much lauded and successful TV career. I first recognized her from Twin Peaks. She was a mysterious aide-de-camp to Thomas Eckhart. For fans of that show, you'll remember her quite well. Jones, I believe her name was, in that show. She also was on Party of Five, a tear-jerking drama on Fox that I watched with Matthew Fox and Lacey Chabert, I believe, was also on that show. Nev Campbell. So that was a big one there. She guested on Seinfeld, and then a lot of people will remember her from Desperate Housewives as Mary Alice Young. And while I did not follow that Eva Longoria themed soap opera on ABC, it had a lot of fans during its run, and that's where you probably remember Brenda. She also was in Starship Troopers, which is a terrific late 90s Paul Verhoeven, captured some of that sass of RoboCop, the original, and also went on some wildly interesting divergent paths. Starship Troopers, that's worth a podcast probably down the line, at least the original. And the pitch from Hannah was to explore the idea of the families on the Enterprise, because not since really the pilot had we gotten into the question of, well, sure, the crew is always going off on away missions and saving the galaxy, but what about the kids that have to go to school and the parents that have to like make their snacks and so forth and make sure that they're doing their lessons and getting their exercise and 3 sleeps a day. And so that was the entry point, obviously. And then what we had with as we mentioned, a Will Wheaton, Wesley Crusher forward episode, is we had this conundrum about a society who have the inability to bear their own children and sort of demand that the Enterprise help them rediscover, family bonding, family time, and how the Enterprise has to resist that. So from a philosophical moral conundrum, we start with some pretty interesting stakes here. We have a cloaked planet, which, again, at the time was something we had not seen in the Star Trek universe. Star Wars would later appropriate that in things as varied as Skeleton Crew for Disney Plus and other shows. But the idea that an entire planet can just appear and disappear at will, that was pretty exciting. But I sense that maybe, gentlemen, and many of us here are family men with families of our own. I have a family of cats, so I can only relate tangentially. But this idea of parenting and you took my kids, but we need your kids, et cetera, et cetera. Did that land with the dads in the audience? How did we feel? Okay, well that
give me back my son. Where do I begin? I'm taking over here.
Talk to us.
I am now Yeah. First of all, we get ChatGPT, which Wesley is talking to, in my opinion. So we're seeing the beginning of it right there. Who knew
Who
that
knew?
we would have that now? Next, why are you putting a captain in charge of a starship who doesn't like kids with a whole bunch of families? Picard should have just been like, Warp 8, engage, and just taken off from there with how he feels about kids. He could have left him behind, especially Wesley. He could care less.
Shut up, Wesley.
That's right. We're leaving you behind. So I was waiting for that. The lighting, again, is almost distracting. Like I was seeing shadows on people because you could tell, and I'm no esteemed USC graduate like one of us here who majored in film, but even I could see that the lighting was that bad. It was driving me nuts, but I think that's a consistent issue with season 1. And I get rudderless Wesley. They cannot decide what to do with this kid. He's just being shoved in our faces to try and give him some type of justification for being there. And his whole idea is to peacefully protest. I mean, someone help me here. I just... Yeah.
If ever there was a episode based on a hunger strike, I mean, it's obviously an environmentalist episode. I mean, it's like it beats you over the head with it, which, look, I get it. I get the message they're trying to send, radiation poisoning, being controlled by a supercomputer to some extent, it ruins society. Like, okay. Like, I get it. The Terminator did it better. But I agree. I think if you pull Will Wheaton, and no offense to him, I do like Will Wheaton. I like certain episodes with Wesley. This is not one of them. Like, I think if you take his character out, and it's just random children who have to, like, pull themselves together somehow, it could be more compelling. I do think the other child actors did a fine job. Like, as a parent, those kids I felt for. But I could give a shit about Wesley Crusher. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I did not. I was like, oh, good, they're getting rid of him. I like that they're trying to make him the de facto captain of the kids. I am so glad they did not lean into that route too much longer on this show, because it just doesn't work. And that was probably the thing that revolted me the most about this episode, is like, hunger strike, really? Like, I mean, how long is that going to last with a bunch of children,
Yeah, plus Wesley's supposed to be like the super genius, and he can't ChatGPT his way out of here.
He can't Kirk this custodian computer to death.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's such and it's a trope. That's the other thing, is like the novelty of the original series with the all-encompassing supercomputer is gone. Like, it was not successful in this episode. I like the idea of a planet that wants to protect itself from foreign threats. I love the idea of cloaking the planet to do so. Obviously, that's going to come with drawbacks. I think you could make a really good story out of our society can't have kids. Or maybe all the men are sterilized by the radiation. So they bring Riker down, and he's got to lay the pipe with every eligible female. Like, this could make a better episode, frankly. Like, oh, all the adult male officers are brought down, and like a Ryza-esque, Captain Picard with the sex object. He's like, oh, what? And then it's kind of a comedy of errors of how they get out of this, like, rampant, sex-crazed planet that's like, we need your seeds. That would be so much more interesting and could actually make for a really great parody movie. But it doesn't work with the, like, okay, we're going to abduct your children because we can't have them. Well, guess what's going to happen to those same children as they age? The same thing. And you're going to end up doing this over and over, and your society will still die. Like, the Aldeans here, like, they still don't get it right. And you'd think with all of the intelligence and all the smarts they have there, they would have figured this out. Like, it just, it doesn't make enough sense.
This was a TOS episode. And this reeked of the original series, which again seems to be a consistent problem during the season, is trying to figure out what they want to be. Which leads me to this question. I might have asked it before, but maybe it just didn't stick in my old 52-year-old brain. When they sit down at the beginning of a season, do they plot out everyone's arc? Because who sat down and thought this was good for Wesley Crusher to take him from this almost godlike traveler experience to, I'm captain of the children, and we're going to peacefully protest? I mean, who thought this was a good idea? Fert, do they sit down and actually plot all this out? I mean, what are they doing?
So yes, yeah. The short answer is yes. Any TV show worth its salt, and several that aren't, would have season-long ideas of all of your principles as to, okay, even if the stories are non-serialized, and especially when they're serialized and everything interconnects with one another, but even on standalone shows, you've got to say, okay, well, this season Picard's going to fall in love, or Sisko's going to fall in love, and then at the end there'll be a cruel, reversal, and they'll go off to another sector, or they'll be killed by a Cardassian spy, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, they're supposed to plot these things out. I think we've talked in Warp Core in the past about how there was the move to try to bring in a youthful, excited audience for Star Trek, because at the time Star Trek was fans of the original show, who were obviously 20, 25, 30 years older than the youngins. And I can see where the dots were connected. I want to briefly interject, because I don't think I had the same adverse negative reaction that my fellow crew members on the bridge did. And I'm trying to sort of piece together in my head why this one felt more enjoyable to me. I agree on all the things. In my notes here, I say custodian, computer AI trope. But I also see Enterprise whacked out of orbit. And for a society that can kind of do that to a ship of the line and Starfleet without so much as, don't come back here or you'll get it 10 times as worse, that to me, that does raise stakes, right? And maybe they don't resolve it in a manner that we're, emotionally or intellectually satisfied with, but just making it so, again, that sort of godlike ability to be like, hey, I can send you, halfway across the galaxy just by snapping my fingers. Like, to me, that obviously registered. We talked about the radiation poisoning in the ozone layer, I believe it was linked to, which was also a big deal in the late 80s. But correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm probably wrong, I would have liked if the cloaking, so you have a society that wants to stay sort of free of outside interference or contamination or what have you, their motives, and they come up with this technology where literally they can hide their planet behind, a smoke screen, an illusion, if you will. And I don't know if they made a one-on-one comparison between cloaking the planet and this ozone layer deterioration, radiation poisoning. If they didn't, that's a missed opportunity, gentlemen, dramatically, that in their zeal to remain apart from the galaxy, they ended up destroying any links to the repopulating their species. Like, I don't think the episode made that connection, and I hate to rewrite on the fly, but if they had, wouldn't that have been a cruel irony? Like, oh yes, our civilization has flourished for years without having to deal with outsiders, but at what price? At what cost? And if that had been, even if it was delivered heavy-handedly and on the nose, that would have been something. I don't believe they ever made that explicit connection. In my mind, I'm rewriting it so that maybe that's the reasoning. So I don't want to introduce something that isn't really part of the episode. But just hearing that alone, gentlemen, I think
that was the implication.
Okay.
I think they were relying on the audience to make that connection, which in a way, like it's kind of obvious now looking back, but there's so much else going on in this episode that like it obfuscates that point, I think. And it would have been a lot more, even if you got like a Picard speech at the end where he's like, wow, and all that effort to remain detached from the interplanetary conflict, it turns out they're destroying themselves. Something to ponder, Data. Like it would have been okay. And I actually it's some of those episodes on TNG where they do kind of a wrap up where Picard is reflecting on sort of the irony of the situation where he's like, oh, all that effort to try and preserve their way of life and they were destroying it. Who would have thought? Great. One line could have made this episode all the stronger, but they were really trying to hit home this ozone layer thing, which it's good. I mean, people should be worried about the ozone. But like you said, there's so many other things they could do so well, like simply just, fly swatting, the flagship of the Federation away. If you can do that, how can you not figure out radiation poisoning? And lest we forget, Brenda Strong is the last born baby on this planet. So, like, she's still pretty young. So this is a fairly new phenomenon, right? So within probably, 25 years-ish, let's say, based on how old her character's supposed to be. So if you think about that, like, this hasn't been going on all that long. And they treat it like, oh, we're so siloed, and, like, we explore art, and we explore music, and we do sculpture, and I'm a leader. Like, you wouldn't have lost all of your general knowledge in less than 20 years. Like, that's stupid, quite frankly. So it loses a lot of what could have been probably more compelling. Now, if you would have told me like it's been 100 years and this is a planet full of octogenarians or something like that, where all the elders have died and they've gone 60 plus years in their silos of, we don't do math, we do what we want, and our computer provides for us. Sure, I could probably get behind that a little bit better than, like, oh, she was our last baby, we won't have any more, we need to get more babies. Like, what? I'm sorry, but that, like, no. And okay, maybe evil genius computer becomes sentient and decides it's gonna just hide the planet away and abduct children, and that's its evil plan to, like, do what exactly? Like, where's the payoff? And
Ooh, I'm sorry, I'm rewriting again in my head. What if the custodian had cloaked the planet and nobody, they weren't technologically savvy enough to figure it out, and they're like, boy, we sure haven't had any visitors in a while. Like, what?
yeah,
Like,
again, it's the payoff. Like, there's no motivation here really in either direction that makes a lot of sense. The custodian isn't like trying to preserve itself necessarily. They're trying to preserve the custodian because they don't want to learn math. Like, they don't want to go to school. Like, really? And again, okay, if everybody's an octogenarian, it's like, okay, I could maybe see, like, you've gone 60 years of siloed knowledge, you have no general education, which is maybe what Will Wheaton's as a child, like, I don't want to go to school. Brr. Okay. I can maybe, as a kid, even maybe get behind that, but then it's like, but it's only been 20 years. Like, there's, like, the people here who are older than Brenda Strong, like, they know enough to do something about this, to maybe say, we're having issues, rather than abduct children, why don't we abduct a doctor or an engineer, or, I don't know, the crew of the Enterprise could beam down in peace and help us fix our, like, we can't get it up problem. Like, there's so much more here that could have been good, and instead it's this weird kidnapping environmentalist story that doesn't quite pan out. Like, there are no stakes. Like, at the end of the day, like, okay, these children could be doomed to a fate of being taken care of until they're adults, and then the older people die, and then now they're adults getting to do whatever they want, being taken care of by a computer. Like, that's bad. Like they're taking away from their parents, but they're all young enough that in 10 years, it's probably not that big a deal anymore. Like, it's like being adopted, not as a baby, but later in life. Like, okay, like, yeah, you're sad for a few years, but you'll probably be fine. And yeah, Picard for sure would have just warped out of there. F them kids. Like, I mean, I understand like the greater duty, the Starfleet captain is going to go and rescue them. Like, but come on, there's too much here that just simply doesn't work. The dots are not being connected well enough for me that this episode just like, it's too unsuccessful in too many areas.
All right, I'll go first. It's not alternative factor bad.
Okay.
But man, borderline. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna be nice. Just because I didn't see Tasha Yar this much, I think this episode. So 3 out of 7. That's probably way too generous. But I'm gonna go 3 out of 7. This is a show. This is an episode I wouldn't show someone that I want to get into Star Trek.
All right. I'll go next just because UrzaMaster's always one of our more optimistic Star Trek, and I want to give him some runway in case he has a late change of heart. I won't tell you, gentlemen, what my initial warp core was now, because thanks to our fruitful and multi-tiered discussion, I have been mulling it along. But I'm going to play the role of UrzaMaster here, as he did so often in the original series. He even tried to find something nice to say about alternative factor, and that's a Herculean effort. I'm giving it a 4. I loved whacking the Enterprise. That's just me. Jerry Hardin and Brenda Strong together equal one Michael Pataki. So having those two there, like that's the math. Hardin plus Strong equals Pataki, if you want to put that on the equation board. And I did not know, ultimately, obviously, it's a less than satisfying overall thing. But as I'm watching it, I'm trying to think to myself, okay, so how are they going to resolve this? Because we have two intractable sides here. Like, we have two sides of a conflict or a disagreement or an argument, and they're both making their points. And while you might lean in one direction or the other, somebody has to give in the middle, I guess. And so ultimately the hunger strike is how we solve this. But as I'm watching this episode, for the first time, I'm saying to myself, okay, so they're going to have to write themselves out of this somehow. And then you can argue with the results. So I'm for, like Lord Uther, I'm probably being overly generous now, but I did not have quite the same qualms that you guys did, but I bet you if we put it up against later episodes of the Berman verse, I'll feel ashamed and I'll knock another star off for the video archives. So 4 for now.
Fair enough. Yeah, I hate to be harsh. I do, but this one is a very rare example in Star Trek canon of good acting, poor writing. And I say that for a couple of reasons, but the primary driver here is like there's no stakes that are really believable. The contrivance of these people not knowing how to fix their situation or even having an inclination as to what's causing it, I don't buy it. You got to sell me on that a little harder. I also think it's a little ridiculous that like these people who know they have a medical problem wouldn't allow a medical doctor to come down and scan them, which tells me that they know their problem and they don't care. So they're just bringing children in to continue their society so they eventually die too. I don't buy that either. I don't think they're stupid enough to do that. I also don't think they're evil enough to do that. I think it's just clumsy. It's clumsy. There's too many holes. I love a great episode or even a bad episode with an evil computer that takes everything over. Even Lower Decks had a few of these that were just phenomenal, including the Wall of Evil Computers, which is still one of my favorite things about that show. But it's just a matter of they were trying to get an ozone layer episode put together. They wanted to say something about it and bring it to people's attention. I'm not against that. And yet again, Data and Riker end up being, the two who save the day, which is great. I'm all for it. But the only thing to me that redeems this episode is that you have child actors, which I normally hate, who actually do a pretty good job of playing scared children who are kind of excited by this prospect. I get to do whatever I want. I can lean into my talents. Like, every kid on Earth is going to love that. But they're also going to be like, I miss my mom and dad. And you get that. That is the only successful part of this episode to me, is like, it's gut-wrenching and it's heart-wrenching to a certain extent. But you ruin it with Wesley Crusher being their leader, who's like, I don't know, always such a wiener. Like, he kind of misses his mom, but he also sort of resents her because he's sort of a teenager, but he's also still kind of a child. He's like a preteen, but he's supposed to be a teenager who's about to enter the academy, and they just haven't figured him out enough yet for him to be compelling enough to front an episode. Now, I will say that I'm in agreement that Jerry Hardin and Brenda Strong elevate this episode quite a bit. One, because Brenda Strong is absolutely a looker, and Jerry Hardin is tremendous in anything he touches. But for me, this is going to be... I was going to go with a 2, but because of all the interesting things we brought up, I'm going to give it a 3. And I'm going to say that's from whacking the Enterprise 3 days out of orbit. That is actually pretty good. I didn't think of that because I was so disgusted by all the other things going on. But that's significant. And it gave me this thought, and this moved it from a 2 to a 3. What if the Borg later assimilates this planet because they don't have the cloak?
Ooh.
Now the Borg have the capabilities to cloak a planet. They have the understanding of what humans drive, what drives them in regards to children. They can offer them something like, oh, you can be amongst our baby Borgs here, and your society's, uniqueness. Like, this is a planet that would absolutely just give itself over wholeheartedly to the Borg.
Oh my God.
And that is something that's interesting because the Borg never, ever, ever get a cloaking device. As a matter of fact, a cloaking device is what undoes the Borg in time. So that thought alone sort of rescues this episode a little bit, is that somehow after these events, they don't just like give themselves to the Borg, which either they all die or they just somehow escape the whole Borg plot. And that needs to be answered. I want an answer to this. What happens to Jerry Hardin and Brenda Strong after this? So, all right, gentlemen. That's how I feel about this episode. It's a 3 out of 7 warp cores for me, but there are better episodes to come. TNG is not over. It was not undone by Wesley Crusher, and it was not undone by Tasha Yar, as we will find out as we move forward. This is episode 105 of the Warp Core podcast. If you've been with us the whole time, we thank you for being a subscriber. If not, check out our archives, because we've got some really great stuff on the original series. We've gone through all of the movies, and there's just lots of great content here on Pending Rebrand that you should check out. If you're a Star Wars fan, we've got you covered too with the Graying Jedi podcast, which will be returning in the future. But until we get to those times, we're going to continue on this journey, this 5-year mission or more, to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go, and to make it so.